You will marry that pathetic little waitress from the coffee shop, or I will strip you of every penny, every property, and every trace of the Sterling name, and make sure she knows exactly why her pathetic dreams of college and a better life will die with your rebellion." The word struck Richard Sterling like a physical blow as he stood frozen in his father's mahogany-paneled office, the scent of expensive cigars and old money suffocating him. At 32, he commanded boardrooms, closed million-dollar deals with a single phone call, and had never bowed to anyone until this moment. "Father, you can't be serious." Richard's voice remained steady despite the earthquake rupturing his carefully constructed world. "Rosalie Martinez, the girl who serves your morning coffee? This is insane." Harrison Sterling didn't even look up from his leather-bound ledger, his silver hair catching the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's skyline. "She's perfect for what I need. Young, naive, and desperate enough to agree to anything. The media scandal of my son marrying a nobody will tank our stock prices just enough for me to buy back the shares my brother stole. Your feelings are irrelevant. And if I refuse, then you'll discover how quickly a billionaire can become a penniless nobody." Harrison's pale blue eyes, so similar to his son's, finally met Richard's gaze with Arctic indifference. "But more importantly, I'll make sure Miss Martinez knows that her rejection of this arrangement will cost her everything. Her mother's medical bills, her college savings, her little brother's scholarship, gone. All because you were too selfish to do your duty." Richard's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The cruelty was breathtaking even for his father. "You're destroying 2 lives to manipulate stock prices? I'm securing our legacy and teaching you that sentiment is a luxury we can't afford." Harrison's smile was razor sharp. "The girl is beautiful enough, and her simplicity will make her grateful for whatever scraps of affection you throw her way. What more could you want? A woman who wants me, not my money," Richard thought bitterly, but the word felt foreign on his tongue. "And what does Miss Martinez think of this arrangement?" "She doesn't know yet, but she will tomorrow morning when you propose to her during her shift at that pathetic little cafe. Make it public, make it romantic, make it impossible for her to refuse without looking like a fool." Harrison's voice dripped with malicious satisfaction. "She'll say yes because she has no choice." The office door creaked open and Margaret, his father's secretary, peered in nervously. "Mr. Sterling, your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Send them in." Harrison waved dismissively at Richard. "We're finished here." As Richard strode toward the door, his father's voice followed him like a death sentence. "Remember, Richard, tomorrow morning at precisely 8:30, I suggest you start rehearsing your proposal." The marble hallway stretched endlessly before him, each step echoing his mounting desperation. Less than 24 hours to surrender his freedom. Less than 24 hours to trap an innocent woman in a loveless marriage. Less than 24 hours to become everything he'd sworn he'd never be. A puppet dancing to his father's strings. His phone buzzed with a text from his best friend Marcus. Board meeting moved to 4 p.m. Also, heard Dad's been asking questions about coffee shops downtown. "Call me." Richard almost laughed at the bitter irony. His father had been watching, planning, calculating every move. Rosalie Martinez had no idea that her simple life was about to be shattered by forces beyond her control. As he waited for the elevator, Richard caught his reflection in the polished steel doors. Expensive suit, perfectly styled dark hair, the kind of devastating good looks that had graced magazine covers and gossip columns. He looked like a man who owned the world, not someone whose life had just been auctioned off to destroy an innocent woman's dreams. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and he stepped inside, already calculating his next move. He had less than a day to find a way out of this nightmare, less than a day to prove that Richard Sterling couldn't be bought, sold, or traded like a commodity. But as the elevator descended toward the lobby, carrying him away from his father's ultimatum and toward Sweet Dreams Cafe where Rosalie Martinez worked double shifts to pay for her mother's chemotherapy, one thought echoed relentlessly in his mind. How do I save us both? Table 6 wants extra foam, Table 3 is still waiting for their scone, and Mrs. Henderson is complaining about the temperature of her Earl Grey again. Rosalie Martinez tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she balanced 3 coffee cups and a plate of pastries, her worn sneakers squeaking against the cafe's checkered floor. "I'm on it, Jenny," she called to her coworker, dodging between mismatched tables and chairs that had seen better decades. Sweet dreams, cafe wasn't much to look at. Faded yellow walls, wobbly furniture, and a temperamental espresso machine that sounded like a dying elephant. But it was home. More importantly, it was survival. The morning rush was brutal, but Rosalie had learned to dance through chaos. Every tip, every smile, every "thank you, sweetheart" from regulars brought her closer to her goals. Mom's next chemo session, Miguel's college application fees, and maybe, just maybe, her own nursing school tuition. "Rosalie, honey, you look exhausted." Mrs. Chen, her favorite regular, patted her weathered hand as Rosalie refilled her coffee. "Are you sleeping enough?" Sleep is overrated. Rosalie forced a bright smile, though the dark circles under her eyes told the truth. Between the morning shift here, evening classes at the community college, and night shifts at the hospital cafeteria, sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. The cafe door chimed and Rosalie's heart skipped, not from romance, but from pure terror. Through the glass windows, she could see black SUVs lining the street like a funeral procession. Men in expensive suits stood outside speaking into earpieces, and walking toward the door was someone she'd only seen in magazines and financial news segments. Richard Sterling. "Oh my God," Jenny whispered, dropping her dish rag. "Is that—" "The billionaire," Rosalie finished, her voice barely audible. "What is he doing here?" Richard entered like he owned the place, which, given his net worth, he probably could. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Rosalie made in 6 months, and his presence seemed to shrink the already tiny cafe. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. Even the dying espresso machine seemed to quiet in respect. He was devastatingly handsome, the kind of man who belonged on red carpets and yacht parties, not in a cramped cafe in Queens. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his blue eyes. God, his eyes were the color of storms over the ocean, but those beautiful eyes looked absolutely miserable. "Miss Martinez?" His voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Rosalie Martinez?" That's me." She clutched her coffee pot like a shield, suddenly aware of her stained apron, her flyaway hair, and the fact that she probably smelled like vanilla syrup in desperation. "My name is Richard Sterling." He moved closer, and she caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something that smelled like fear. "I need to speak with you." "Sir, I'm working. If you'd like to order something." "I'd like to order a lifetime." The words came out in a rush, and Richard's face went pale. Around them, the cafe fell into complete silence. "I mean, Rosalie, would you marry me?" The coffee pot slipped from her hands, shattering against the floor in an explosion of glass and hot coffee. The sound seemed to break the spell, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Did he just— "Oh my God, a proposal! Get your phone out, Martha, this is going viral." What?" Rosalie stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Did you just ask me to marry you?" "Yes." Richard's voice was stronger now, but she could see his hands shaking. "I know this is sudden, but I've been watching you. Your kindness, your dedication to your family, your incredible work ethic. You're exactly the kind of woman I want to spend my life with." The lies rolled off his tongue like honey, but Rosalie wasn't buying it. She'd grown up in the Bronx, daughter of a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. She could spot a con from a mile away. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice cutting through the excited chatter of the cafe patrons. "You've never been in here before. I think you have me confused with someone else." "I know you're putting yourself through nursing school," Richard said, and her blood ran cold. How could he possibly know that? "I know your mother is fighting cancer. I know your brother Miguel is applying to Columbia. I know you work 3 jobs and still find time to volunteer at the children's hospital on weekends." The cafe spun around her. "How do you know those things?" Because I've fallen in love with your spirit, your determination, your beautiful heart. Each word sounded more rehearsed than the last. Rosalie Martinez, you're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, and I'm asking you to be my wife. From his jacket pocket, he produced a ring box. When he opened it, gasps echoed through the cafe. The diamond was enormous, catching the morning light and throwing rainbows across the faded walls. It was beautiful, spectacular, and absolutely terrifying. I can't, Rosalie whispered, backing away. This is insane. You're insane. I don't know you and you don't know me, and I know you need help, Richard said quietly so only she could hear. I know your mother's medical bills are crushing you. I know you're about to lose your apartment. I know Miguel's scholarship application was rejected and you're trying to figure out how to pay for his tuition. Her knees almost buckled. Those weren't public facts. Those were her private nightmares, the fears that kept her awake at night. How do you know those things? Because I want to help you. Richard stepped closer and she could see something desperate in his eyes. Marry me, Rosalie. I'll take care of everything. Your mother's treatment, Miguel's education, your nursing school, everything. All you have to do is say yes. And what do you get out of it? She was proud that her voice didn't shake. Billionaires don't marry waitresses out of the goodness of their hearts. For a moment, his perfect mask slipped, and she saw something raw and vulnerable underneath. I get a wife who sees me as more than just a bank account. I get someone real, someone honest, someone who'll love me for who I am, not what I have. The lie was so smooth, so practiced that for a split second, Rosalie almost believed it. But then she saw the photographer in the corner, the one who'd been pretending to read a newspaper while snapping pictures. She saw the news van pulling up outside. She saw the trap closing around her. You're recording this, she said, her voice hollow. This is all a show. Rosalie, please. No. She untied her apron with shaking hands. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Mr. Sterling, but I'm not playing along. Keep your ring, keep your money, and keep your lies. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. If you walk away now, your mother won't get the experimental treatment she needs. Miguel will lose his chance at college. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what if. The cafe had gone silent again, everyone watching the drama unfold like a real-life soap opera. Rosalie felt the weight of their stares, the phones recording her humiliation, the impossible choice being forced upon her. You're threatening me, she said, turning back to face him. I'm offering you a solution. Richard held up the ring, and the diamond caught the light like a star. One word, Rosalie. Just say yes and all your problems disappear. She looked at the ring, then at his face, then at the crowd of people waiting for her answer. Mrs. Chen was crying. Jenny was recording with her phone. Outside, more news vans were arriving. Why me? She whispered. Because you're perfect, Richard said, and for the first time, his voice sounded genuine. Because you're everything I'm not. Because you're real. Rosalie closed her eyes and thought of her mother, pale and weak from chemotherapy. She thought of Miguel, brilliant and ambitious, whose dreams were crumbling because they couldn't afford his education. She thought of herself, exhausted and desperate, working herself to death for scraps. When she opened her eyes, Richard was still waiting, the ring still glittering in his hand like a beautiful prison. Yes, she whispered, and the word felt like surrender. The cafe erupted in cheers and applause. Richard slipped the ring onto her finger and it was heavy, cold, and absolutely perfect. He leaned down to kiss her, and she let him, though his lips felt like ice against hers. As the crowd celebrated around them, Rosalie caught Richard's eye over the chaos. For just a moment, she saw something there that looked like guilt, like regret, like he was as trapped as she was. Then the moment passed and he was smiling for the cameras, playing the part of the love-struck billionaire who'd found his Cinderella in a coffee shop. But Rosalie knew the truth. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was a business transaction. And she'd just sold her soul to the devil. This is not a dress, it's a torture device disguised as fabric. Rosalie stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The emerald green gown hugged curves she'd forgotten she had, and the price tag, which she'd accidentally glimpsed, could have paid her rent for 6 months. "Madam looks absolutely stunning," purred Vivian, the personal shopper who'd been assigned to transform her. The woman's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds, and her eyes held the same warmth as a cobra's. "Mr. Sterling will be positively enchanted." It had been 3 days since the proposal that broke the internet. 3 days of photographers camping outside her apartment, reporters shoving microphones in her face, and her phone buzzing with interview requests from every talk show in America. 3 days of living in a fishbowl, and she was already drowning. "I look like I'm playing dress-up," Rosalie muttered, tugging at the neckline that showed more cleavage than she'd ever displayed in public. "This isn't me. It's the new you, darling." Vivian circled her like a predator sizing up prey. "The future Mrs. Sterling can't be seen in—" She glanced dismissively at Rosalie's folded jeans and coffee-stained sweater. "Those things." The boutique was a temple to excess, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, where the salespeople spoke in hushed tones about exclusive pieces and limited collections. The cheapest item cost more than Rosalie's monthly salary, and every surface seemed designed to remind her that she didn't belong. "The shoes are killing me," Rosalie complained, wobbling on heels that could double as weapons. "How do rich women even walk in these things?" "Practice, my dear. Lots of practice." Vivian's smile grew more predatory. "We'll also need to work on your posture, your diction, and your table manners. The Sterling family expects perfection." "Lucky me." Rosalie's sarcasm was lost on the woman, who was already pulling out more dresses that looked like they belonged in a museum. The boutique door chimed, and Rosalie's heart did something complicated when Richard walked in. He was devastatingly handsome in a navy suit that probably cost more than her car, but there were dark circles under his eyes that matched her own. 3 days of pretending to be madly in love had apparently taken a toll on both of them. "How are we doing?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Wonderfully," Vivian gushed. "Miss Martinez is a natural canvas. With the right guidance, she'll be absolutely acceptable." Acceptable. The word hit like a slap. Rosalie caught Richard's wince in the mirror, and something shifted in his expression. "That's enough," he said quietly. "Leave us." "But sir, we haven't finished." "I said leave us." His voice carried the authority of someone who'd never been questioned, and Vivian practically scurried out of the dressing room. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and unspoken truths. Rosalie kept her eyes on the mirror, watching Richard's reflection as he struggled with words that wouldn't come. "You look—" he started, then stopped. "You look beautiful." "I look like a fraud." She turned to face him, and the dress rustled like whispers. "Your father's money can buy me pretty dresses, but it can't change what I am." "And what's that?" "A waitress from Queens who's in way over her head." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your friends are going to eat me alive, aren't they?" Richard's jaw tightened. "They're not my friends. They're parasites who mistake cruelty for wit and money for character." "Then why do you care what they think?" "Because—" He stopped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Because I've been playing this game my whole life. Because I don't know how to be anything else." For a moment his mask slipped, and Rosalie saw something raw and real underneath. The billionaire facade cracked, revealing someone who looked as lost as she felt. "Why did you really ask me to marry you?" she asked softly. "And don't give me that rehearsed speech about falling in love with my spirit." Richard moved closer, and she caught that scent again. Expensive cologne mixed with something that smelled like loneliness. "Because my father threatened to destroy both of us if I didn't. Because I'm a coward who couldn't find another way out. Because I'm just as trapped as you are." The honesty was unexpected, and it knocked the wind out of her. "What aren't you telling me?" "Everything." He laughed bitterly. "The truth is, Rosalie, I've never been in love. I've never even been on a real date. Every woman I've ever been with wanted my money, my connections, my name. Never me. So you thought you'd buy someone who had no choice? I thought I'd save us both." He sat down heavily on the velvet settee, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. My father wants to use our marriage to manipulate stock prices. He researched you, found your vulnerabilities, and decided you were perfect for his scheme. And you went along with it. I went along with it because the alternative was watching him destroy your family anyway, just to teach me a lesson. Richard's voice was hollow. At least this way, you get something out of it. Rosalie stared at him, this broken prince in his perfect suit, and felt something shift inside her chest. You could have warned me, given me a choice. Would you have chosen differently? With your mother's treatment on the line? With Miguel's future at stake? She wanted to say yes, wanted to claim she would have chosen pride over pragmatism, but they both knew the truth. No, she whispered. I would have made the same choice. I'm sorry. The words sounded rusty, like he wasn't used to saying them. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. I'm sorry my father is a monster. I'm sorry your first proposal was a business transaction instead of a love story. My first proposal was Tommy Moretti asking me to junior prom behind the gym dumpster, Rosalie said, and was surprised when Richard laughed. A real laugh that transformed his entire face. So, technically this is my second fake proposal. Did you say yes to Tommy? I said yes to the corsage and no to the wandering hands. She found herself smiling despite everything. He took Jenny Chen instead, and they're still married with 3 kids. Good for them. Richard's smile faded. I can't promise you a real marriage, Rosalie. I don't know how to love someone. But I can promise you'll never want for anything, and I'll do everything in my power to make this bearable. Bearable. She tested the word like it was foreign. Every little girl dreams of a bearable marriage. What did you dream of? The question caught her off guard. I dreamed of someone who'd love me enough to fight for me. Someone who'd choose me over everything else. Someone who'd make me feel like I was worth more than the sum of my problems. You are worth more, Richard said quietly. You're worth everything. Pretty words from a man who bought me like a piece of property. I know. He stood up, the moment of vulnerability passing. I know I'm asking the impossible, but maybe we can find a way to make this work. Maybe we can find a way to be friends at least. Friends. She considered it. I've never been friends with a billionaire before. I've never been friends with anyone before. The admission was so stark, so lonely, that Rosalie felt her heart crack a little. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Welcome to my world. Richard moved toward the door, then paused. The engagement party is tomorrow night. 200 of New York's most vicious socialites all waiting to see if the billionaire's new fiancé will sink or swim. No pressure then. They'll try to destroy you, he said matter-of-factly. They'll smile to your face and sharpen their knives behind your back. They'll find every weakness and exploit it for sport. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to be prepared. Because despite everything, I don't want to see you hurt. He met her eyes in the mirror. And because I'm hoping you'll prove them wrong. What if I can't? What if I embarrass you? Then you'll join the club. Richard's smile was sad and beautiful. I've been embarrassing my father my whole life just by existing. After he left, Rosalie stared at her reflection for a long time. The woman in the mirror looked elegant, expensive, polished. But underneath the designer gown and professional makeup, she was still the same girl who'd grown up eating government cheese and wearing hand-me-downs. Tomorrow night she'd walk into a room full of people who had everything she'd ever wanted and more. They'd judge her, mock her, try to break her. But she'd survived worse than rich people's opinions. She'd survived poverty. She'd survived her father walking out. She'd survived watching her mother waste away from cancer while working 3 jobs to pay for treatment. She could survive one night with the wolves. But as she slipped out of the emerald dress and back into her familiar jeans, Rosalie couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to lose herself completely. The girl who'd said yes in the coffee shop was disappearing, replaced by someone she didn't recognize. The question was, when the transformation was complete, would there be anything left of Rosalie Martinez? Or would she become just another beautiful, empty accessory in Richard Sterling's gilded cage? She's exactly what I expected. Common, desperate, and completely out of her depth. The whisper sliced through the glittering ballroom like a blade, followed by the kind of laughter that sounded like breaking crystal. Rosalie stood frozen at the top of the marble staircase, her hand gripping the gold banister so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Below her stretched a sea of Manhattan's elite, women draped in diamonds and cruelty, men who wore their wealth like armor, all of them watching her descent with the hungry anticipation of predators smelling blood. The Sterling family mansion was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars cast rainbows across walls adorned with priceless art. The ballroom could have housed her entire apartment building and probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Every surface gleamed with the kind of perfection that money could buy, cold and beautiful and utterly intimidating. "Breathe," she whispered to herself, smoothing down the silver gown that Vivian had insisted was absolutely essential for making the right impression. The dress was stunning, a work of art that transformed her into someone she barely recognized, but it felt like wearing someone else's skin. At the bottom of the stairs, Richard waited in a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped off a movie screen. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for a moment she saw something that looked like encouragement, or maybe pity. It was hard to tell with him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison Sterling's voice boomed across the ballroom as Rosalie finally reached the bottom step. "I present my son Richard and his lovely fiancée, Rosalie Martinez." The applause was polite, calculated, and about as warm as an Arctic wind. Rosalie felt every gaze dissecting her appearance, her posture, her obvious discomfort. She was a specimen under a microscope, and they were all eager to find her flaws. Miss Martinez. A woman glided over with the grace of a viper, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon and her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "I'm Victoria Ashworth. I've known Richard since we were children." "It's nice to meet you," Rosalie replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "Charming accent," Victoria purred, though her tone suggested it was anything but charming. "Where exactly are you from?" Richard was so vague about your background. "Queens," Rosalie said simply, refusing to elaborate or apologize. "How authentic." Victoria's smile grew wider, more predatory. "And what do you do? For work, I mean. When you're not serving coffee?" The way she said serving coffee made it sound like a communicable disease. Around them, conversations had quieted as other guests leaned in to listen to the interrogation. "I'm studying to be a nurse," Rosalie replied, lifting her chin. "I believe in helping people." How noble. The word dripped with condescension. Richard's previous girlfriends were also accomplished. Lawyers, doctors, heiresses. It's refreshing to see him branching out into community service. The insult hit its mark, but before Rosalie could respond, Richard appeared at her side, his hand warm against the small of her back. "Victoria," he said coolly. "Still practicing the art of passive aggression, I see. How wonderfully consistent." "Richard, darling, I was just getting acquainted with your interesting choice." Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "She's exactly what your father described." "And what exactly did my father say?" Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. "Oh, just that she was perfect for your needs, so grateful, so manageable." Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. "It's wonderful when everything works out so financially." The blood drained from Rosalie's face. The implication was clear. Everyone knew this was a transaction, not a love story. She was the purchased bride, bought and paid for, and they all knew it. "Excuse me," Rosalie murmured, desperate to escape the suffocating attention. "I need some air." She fled toward the terrace, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown to her humiliation. Behind her, she could hear the murmur of excited whispers, the social vultures already picking apart the evening's entertainment. The terrace overlooked Central Park, and the cool night air felt like salvation against her burning cheeks. She gripped the stone balustrade and tried to steady her breathing, fighting back tears that would only give them more ammunition. "They're awful, aren't they?" Rosalie spun around to find a young woman about her own age with kind eyes and a genuine smile that seemed completely out of place at this gathering. "I'm sorry?" Rosalie wiped at her eyes, hoping her makeup wasn't completely ruined. "The social piranhas in there." The woman gestured toward the ballroom. "I'm Elena Castellanos, by the way. My family owns a chain of hotels, which apparently qualifies me to attend these torture sessions. Rosalie Martinez, though I'm sure you already knew that. The infamous coffee shop Cinderella." Elena's smile was warm, not mocking. "You're either very brave or completely insane to take on this crowd." "Probably both." Rosalie found herself almost smiling. "How do you stand it?" "Practice and a lot of alcohol." Elena leaned against the balustrade beside her. "Want some advice from someone who's survived these sharks for 26 years? Please. They smell fear like blood in the water. The more you let them see they're getting to you, the more vicious they'll become." Elena's expression grew serious. "But here's the thing. Half of them are one bad investment away from being exactly where you started. They're terrified someone will discover they're just as insecure and desperate as everyone else. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you realize you have something they don't. Authenticity. You earned your place in that room by surviving things they can't even imagine. They inherited theirs from Daddy's bank account." Before Rosalie could respond, Richard appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled fury. "There you are." He strode over, and she could see the tension in every line of his body. "I was looking for you." "Your fan club was being so welcoming," Rosalie said dryly. "Especially Victoria. She has such interesting theories about our relationship." Richard's jaw tightened. "Victoria Ashworth is a vicious harpy who's angry I never took her seriously. Don't let her poison get under your skin." Too late. Rosalie turned back toward the city lights, trying to process the evening's humiliations. "They all know, don't they? They all know this is fake. Does it matter?" Richard moved beside her, his voice softer now. "Half the marriages in that room are business arrangements disguised as love stories. But their wives weren't bought like property. Weren't they?" He laughed bitterly. "At least you got to choose. Most of them were traded like commodities before they were old enough to have opinions." Elena cleared her throat delicately. "I should probably go back inside before people start talking. Richard, try not to let your father's friends destroy her completely. Some of us actually like having real people around." After Elena left, silence stretched between them, filled with the distant sounds of the city and the muffled party inside. "I can't do this," Rosalie said finally. "I thought I could, but I can't. I'm not built for this world." "You're stronger than all of them combined," Richard said quietly. "You've survived things that would break them in half. Strength doesn't matter when you're drowning." She turned to face him, and something in her expression made him step closer. "Why do you care? Really? You barely know me." "Because—" He stopped, struggling with words that seemed to stick in his throat. "Because you're the first real thing I've encountered in 32 years. Because when you look at me, you don't see dollar signs. Because you make me want to be better than what I am." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Rosalie studied his face in the moonlight, searching for lies and finding only raw honesty that took her breath away. "Richard, I know it's not fair," he continued, stepping closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I know I have no right to ask you to care about someone like me. But I do care about you, Rosalie. More than I should. More than is safe." "This is impossible," she whispered, but she didn't step away. "We're from different worlds. This will never work." "I know." His hand rose to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "But maybe impossible is better than empty." The kiss was inevitable, like gravity pulling them together. His lips were warm and surprisingly soft, and when he deepened the kiss, Rosalie felt something inside her chest crack open like an egg. This wasn't the cold, calculated kiss from the coffee shop. This was fire and desperate need and something that felt dangerously close to hope. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, staring at each other like they'd just discovered something miraculous and terrifying. "Oh God," Rosalie breathed. "This changes everything." "Or nothing," Richard said, but his voice was shaky. "We could pretend it didn't happen, go back to the arrangement." "Could you? Pretend?" Before he could answer, the terrace doors burst open, and Harrison Sterling strode out, his face a mask of cold fury. "How touching," the older man said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The bought bride actually believes the performance. How delightfully naive." "Father," Richard started, but Harrison cut him off with a gesture. "Did you really think I wouldn't have the terrace monitored? Every word, every touch, every pathetic declaration recorded for posterity." Harrison's smile was cruel as winter. "Richard, you're becoming far too attached to your little pet. It's time to remind her of her place." He tossed a manila envelope at Rosalie's feet. Photographs spilled out, images of her mother in the hospital, her brother at school, her own apartment building. But it was the final photo that made her blood turn to ice, a legal document with her mother's signature, agreeing to experimental treatment that would bankrupt the family if Richard defaulted on his obligations. "The contract is quite specific, my dear," Harrison continued conversationally. "Any attempt to break the engagement, any scandal, any failure to fulfill your duties and the financial support ends immediately. Your mother's treatment stops, your brother's future disappears, and you'll find yourself blacklisted from every hospital in the state." "You can't do this," Rosalie whispered. But even as she said it, she knew he could. He had power she couldn't fight, resources she couldn't match. "I can do anything I want," Harrison replied. "The question is, how much is your family worth to you?" Rosalie looked at Richard, desperate for him to say something, to fight for her, to prove that what they'd just shared meant something. But he stood frozen, his face pale and stricken, looking like a man watching his world collapse. "Well," Harrison prompted, "shall we return to the party?" I believe Victoria was just about to propose a toast to the happy couple. With shaking hands, Rosalie gathered the photographs, each image a chain binding her to this gilded prison. When she looked up, Richard's eyes were full of pain and something that might have been love. But love wasn't enough. It never was. "Yes," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the wreckage of her heart. "Let's go back to the party." As they walked back toward the ballroom, Harrison's laughter followed them like the sound of breaking dreams. The wolves were waiting inside, hungry for blood, and Rosalie had just learned that even princes could be powerless against kings. The fairy tale was over before it had even begun. "You look like hell, and that's coming from someone who hasn't slept in 3 days." Marcus Chen slumped into the leather chair across from Richard's desk, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. As Richard's oldest friend and the company's chief legal counsel, Marcus had seen him through every crisis, but never anything like this. Richard didn't look up from the contract he'd been staring at for the past hour, the words blurring together like accusations. 2 weeks had passed since the engagement party, 2 weeks of playing the perfect couple in public while dying slowly in private. 2 weeks of watching Rosalie smile for cameras while her eyes grew emptier each day. "The wedding is in 6 weeks, Richard said flatly. "Everything's arranged. The cathedral, the reception, the honeymoon in Tuscany that she'll hate because she's never been out of the country and will feel like a fraud the entire time." "Jesus, Richard," Marcus rubbed his face. "Listen to yourself, you're planning a funeral, not a wedding. What's the difference?" Richard finally looked up, and Marcus flinched at what he saw there. His friend looked haunted, hollow, like someone had carved out everything vital and left only the shell. "She hasn't spoken to me, really spoken to me, since that night. She plays her part perfectly, says all the right things, smiles for the photographers. But she's gone, Marcus. I killed whatever was real between us. You didn't pull the trigger, your father did. I loaded the gun." Richard stood abruptly, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "I should have fought for her, should have told my father to go to hell and found another way. And let him destroy her family anyway? Come on, man, you know Harrison. He would have crushed them just to teach you a lesson. So instead, I'm crushing her." Richard's laugh was bitter as poison. Do you know what she said to me yesterday, when I asked if she was happy with the wedding arrangements? Marcus waited, dreading the answer. She said, "Does it matter? I'm not the one paying for it." Richard's voice cracked slightly. She's given up, Marcus. She's accepted that she's just a purchased bride, a business transaction, and it's killing me. Then do something about it. Like what? My father has her family's lives in his hands. One wrong move from me and her mother's treatment stops. Miguel loses his scholarship. Rosalie gets blacklisted from every medical program in the state. Richard slammed his fist against the window. I'm trapped in a cage made of other people's dreams. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying his friend with the calculating gaze that made him such a formidable lawyer. What if I told you there might be a way out? Richard spun around. What are you talking about? I've been digging into your father's business dealings, quietly, very quietly. Marcus pulled out a thick folder. Harrison Sterling is not the untouchable titan he pretends to be. He's made mistakes, Richard, big ones. What kind of mistakes? The kind that involve offshore accounts, tax evasion, and bribing city officials to fast-track zoning permits. Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade, the kind that could land him in federal prison for 20 to life. Richard stared at the folder like it might explode. You're talking about bringing down my own father. I'm talking about freeing yourself and the woman you love. Marcus leaned forward. Because you do love her, don't you? This isn't just guilt or rebellion anymore. The question hit Richard like a physical blow. When had it happened? When had the arrangement become real? When had Rosalie Martinez, fierce, stubborn, beautiful Rosalie, become the most important thing in his world? I love her, he whispered, the words foreign but true. God help me. I love her more than I've ever loved anything, and she'll never forgive me for what I've done to her. She might if you give her a reason to. Before Richard could respond, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Sterling, Miss Martinez is here to see you. Richard's heart stopped. Rosalie never came to his office. In the 2 weeks since the party, she'd maintained careful distance, meeting him only for public appearances and photo opportunities. Send her in, he managed. The door opened and Rosalie walked in wearing the same jeans and worn sneakers she'd had on the day he'd proposed. She looked tired, fragile, but there was something else in her expression, a steely determination that made Richard's chest tighten with dread. Marcus, she said politely, could we have a moment alone? Marcus glanced between them, clearly sensing the tension. Of course. Richard, think about what I said. He gathered his folder and left, closing the door behind him with ominous finality. Rosalie stood in the center of the vast office, looking small and out of place among the expensive furniture and corporate trophies. But there was nothing small about the fire in her dark eyes. I can't do this anymore, she said without preamble. I'm calling off the wedding. The words hit Richard like a sledgehammer to the chest. Rosalie, you can't. My father will destroy my family, I know. Her voice was steady, resigned. I've accepted that. Some prices are too high to pay, even for the people you love. What are you talking about? I'm talking about my soul. She moved closer, and he could see the pain etched in every line of her face. I'm disappearing, Richard. Every day I play this role, I lose a little more of who I am. Soon there won't be anything left but an empty shell in designer clothes. We can make this work, Richard said desperately. After we're married, things will be different. We can... What, fall in love? Her laugh was hollow. You can't build love on a foundation of lies and blackmail. I know that now. But that night on the terrace was a mistake. The words were like knives. A moment of weakness that I won't repeat. You're a good man, Richard, trapped in an impossible situation. But I won't be your prison, and I won't let you be mine. Richard felt something breaking inside his chest, something vital and irreplaceable. What about your mother? Miguel's education? I'll find another way. I always have. Rosalie's chin lifted with familiar defiance. There are clinical trials, charity programs, student loans. It won't be easy, but it'll be honest. And if there isn't another way? If they... He couldn't finish the sentence. Then at least I'll face it as myself, not as some purchased puppet dancing to your father's tune. Rosalie pulled the engagement ring from her finger, the massive diamond that had once seemed like salvation and now felt like a shackle. She set it on his desk with a soft click. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm sorry I can't be what you need. But I have to choose myself this time. She turned to leave, and Richard felt panic clawing at his throat. Rosalie, wait, please. She paused at the door but didn't turn around. The press release should say it was mutual. That we realized we wanted different things. Keep it clean, keep it simple. Your father gets what he wants. A broken engagement that ruins his stock manipulation. And maybe, if we're lucky, we both get our lives back. I don't want my life back, Richard said desperately. I want you. I want us. There is no us, Rosalie said softly. There never was. Just two people pretending to be something we're not. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and Richard collapsed into his chair, staring at the ring she'd left behind. It caught the afternoon light, throwing rainbows across his desk like tears. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Whatever just happened, don't do anything stupid. The folder is your way out, use it. But as Richard picked up the engagement ring and felt its cold weight in his palm, he realized Marcus was wrong. There was no way out that didn't involve losing the one thing that mattered. His father would win, as he always did. Rosalie would disappear back into her world of double shifts and impossible dreams. And Richard would return to his gilded cage, richer than ever and emptier than he'd thought possible. Unless... Richard looked at Marcus's folder, then at the ring, then out at the city where somewhere, Rosalie Martinez was walking away from the only man who'd ever truly loved her. A plan began forming in his mind, desperate, dangerous, and probably doomed to failure. But for the first time in his life, Richard Sterling was willing to risk everything for love, even if it meant destroying his father's empire and his own fortune in the process. Even if it meant losing everything except the woman who'd already walked away. Especially then. He picked up his phone and dialed Marcus's number. It's me. Remember that folder? I want to know everything. Every detail. Every piece of evidence. Every way to bring my father down. Richard, what are you planning? Revolution, Richard said, surprising himself with how good the word tasted. I'm planning a revolution. Through his office window, he could see the street where Rosalie had probably caught a taxi back to Queens, back to her real life. Back to a world where people fought for what they believed in instead of accepting what they were given. It was time Richard learned to fight for something that mattered. It was time he proved that love was worth more than money, more than power, more than his father's approval. It was time to choose Rosalie Martinez over everything else in his life, even if she'd already chosen to walk away from him. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, thank you for coming on such short notice. Richard Sterling stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, facing a sea of reporters, cameras, and curious socialites who'd been drawn by whispers of scandal. His hands were steady, his voice clear, but his heart was hammering like a war drum. In the back of the room, he could see his father's face, a mask of rage and disbelief that Harrison Sterling was struggling to control. Good. Let him sweat. Let him wonder how his perfectly controlled world was about to implode. 3 weeks ago, I announced my engagement to Miss Rosalie Martinez. Richard continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed room. Today, I'm here to tell you the truth about that announcement, and about the man who orchestrated it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning. In the press section, Richard spotted Elena Castellanos holding up her phone, live streaming to her millions of social media followers. Perfect. The bigger the audience, the better. My engagement to Miss Martinez was not a love story, Richard said, each word carefully chosen, deliberately devastating. It was a business arrangement forced upon both of us by my father, Harrison Sterling, as part of an elaborate scheme to manipulate stock prices and defraud investors. The murmur became a roar. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Harrison started moving toward the exit, but Richard had anticipated this. Marcus appeared at the doors, flanked by FBI agents whose presence sent shockwaves through the crowd. "You see?" Richard continued, raising his voice above the chaos. "My father threatened to destroy Miss Martinez's family, to cut off her mother's cancer treatment, to ruin her brother's education, unless she agreed to marry me. He researched her vulnerabilities, exploited her desperation, and bought her like property. This is preposterous." Harrison's voice boomed from across the room. "Richard, you're having some kind of breakdown. Don't listen to him." "I have documentation." Richard cut him off, nodding to Marcus, who stepped forward with the thick folder that would end Harrison Sterling's reign of terror. Bank records showing payments to offshore accounts, recorded conversations discussing bribes to city officials, tax evasion spanning 3 decades. All of it will be turned over to federal prosecutors within the hour. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some people were pushing toward the exits, others pressing forward for a better view of the Sterling family's spectacular destruction. But Richard only had eyes for one person. There, slipping in through a side door, was Rosalie Martinez. She looked beautiful and heartbroken in a simple black dress, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes wide with shock as she took in the scene unfolding before her. When their gazes met across the room, Richard felt his chest tighten with love and hope and desperate prayer. "The truth is," Richard said, his voice cutting through the noise as he focused entirely on Rosalie, "I fell in love with her. Not because of my father's scheme, not because of any arrangement, but because Rosalie Martinez is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. She's brave, compassionate, fiercely loyal, and strong enough to walk away from everything rather than compromise her integrity." Rosalie's hand flew to her mouth, tears glistening in her eyes. "She called off our engagement because she refused to be bought," Richard continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Because she understood what I was too cowardly to admit, that love can't be built on lies and manipulation. She chose dignity over security, truth over comfort, herself over the easy path." "Richard, stop this immediately," Harrison commanded, but his son no longer answered to him. "Miss Martinez," Richard said, stepping away from the podium and walking toward her through the crowd that parted like the Red Sea. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I've caused you pain that I may never be able to heal. But I'm here, in front of all these people, to tell you that I love you. Not because of any arrangement, not because my father commanded it, but because you showed me what it means to be truly alive." He stopped in front of her, close enough to see the tears streaming down her cheeks, close enough to count her eyelashes if he wanted to memorize her face one more time. "I'm giving up everything," he said softly, though the microphones still caught his words and broadcast them to the world. "The company, the fortune, the Sterling name. I'm dissolving the trust fund, liquidating my assets, and donating it all to cancer research and educational charities. I don't want money that was built on other people's suffering." "Richard," Rosalie whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos surrounding them. "What are you doing?" "I'm choosing you," he said simply. "I'm choosing love over money, truth over power, us over everything else. If you'll have me." Behind them, FBI agents were reading Harrison Sterling his rights while cameras captured every moment of his downfall. The man who'd controlled everything, manipulated everyone, terrorized his own son for 32 years, was finally facing justice. But Richard barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed to the woman standing in front of him, the woman who held his heart and his future in her hands. "I don't have anything to offer you now," he continued, his voice raw with emotion. "No mansion, no trust fund, no family fortune, just me. Just a man who loves you more than his next breath and will spend the rest of his life proving it if you'll let him." "You idiot," Rosalie said, and then she was laughing and crying at the same time. "You beautiful, stubborn, impossible idiot." "Is that a yes?" Richard asked, hardly daring to hope. "You gave up billions of dollars," she said, shaking her head in amazement. "Your father, your company, everything." "I gave up nothing," Richard replied, reaching out to cup her face in his hands. I chose everything. I chose you. The kiss was witnessed by 300 people, broadcast live to millions more, and would be replayed on news programs for weeks. But for Richard and Rosalie, the world disappeared. There was only this moment, this choice, this love that had survived manipulation, blackmail, and the kind of obstacles that destroyed weaker hearts. When they broke apart, the crowd erupted in applause. Even the jaded reporters were smiling, caught up in the fairy tale that had emerged from the wreckage of the Sterling Empire. So, Rosalie said, her eyes sparkling with tears and laughter. What happens now? You're unemployed, penniless, and technically homeless since I assume that mansion belongs to your father. Now, Richard said, pulling her closer. We figure it out together. I was thinking maybe I could learn to make coffee. I hear there's an opening at Sweet Dreams Cafe. The pay is terrible, Rosalie warned him. The company is excellent, Richard replied. The hours are brutal. I love a challenge. The customers can be demanding. I've dealt with worse. I survived 32 years with Harrison Sterling as a father. Rosalie laughed, the sound like music in the chaos of the collapsing Sterling dynasty. In that case, Mr. Sterling, when can you start? How about right now? Richard asked, then dropped to one knee in front of 300 witnesses and the woman who'd saved his soul. From his pocket, he pulled out a simple silver ring, nothing like the massive diamond she'd returned to his office. This one was modest, beautiful, and bought with the last of his personal funds. Rosalie Martinez, he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Will you marry me? Not because anyone is forcing you, not because of any arrangement or threat or manipulation. Will you marry me because I love you? Because you love me? And because we choose each other over everything else in this crazy world? Through her tears, Rosalie's smile was radiant as the sun. Yes, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Yes, I'll marry you, Richard Sterling. Not for your money, since you don't have any. Not for your connections, since you've burned them all. I'll marry you because you're the most extraordinary man I've ever met, and because you just proved that love really can conquer all. The ring slipped onto her finger like it belonged there, and when Richard stood to kiss his future wife, the applause was deafening. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and somewhere in the background, Harrison Sterling was being led away in handcuffs. But Richard and Rosalie only had eyes for each other. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the community center in Queens, surrounded by family, friends, and neighbors who'd watched their real-life fairy tale unfold. Richard worked at Sweet Dreams Cafe by day and studied business management by night, planning to open a foundation for families facing medical crises. Rosalie finished nursing school with honors and landed her dream job at the Children's Hospital. They lived in a tiny apartment above the cafe, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and had never been happier, because they'd learned the most important lesson of all. True wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in love, laughter, and the courage to choose each other every single day. And they lived, as all the best love stories promise, happily ever after. The end.